We're here to help you navigate your business growth with strategic conversations and insights from experts in multiple industries. Welcome to Wayfinding Growth.
This episode is brought to you by Impulse Creative's Video Marketing Masterclass. George B. Thomas built out an 11-module on-demand course on how to leverage video in your business at impulsecreative.com/VFM for Video Masterclass. Remington, welcome back to your show. It's kind of funny welcoming you as the co-host. That's right.
This is fun.
So I'm looking forward to diving into this stuff, man, because as we said in the transition episode, this is a little bit of a different feel for us, and obviously a different look too, because I don't look like George. But as he's working on Sprocket Talk,
still have hair. We got that balance.
That's true. So I want to dive into the move today. We recently moved our office.
Yep.
What does that look like for an entrepreneur? How do you get into that mindset of we just need to move?
Yeah, so it sucks. but
Yeah.
No, so I think there's a couple different things, and I want to give a little bit of perspective on it. So we were at our previous location for 5 years. When we signed the lease, we signed a 2-year extension opportunity to continue at the current rate that we had. And prior to that, I think we were in our previous place, I think it was 2 years. And then it was like small office spaces prior that we bounced between, 2-year leases back to back. So when it came up to it was the beginning of this year, we were looking through everything. We're like, wait, I'm pretty sure we have our extension coming soon. And as we went through that, we found out that our notice to stay, which is something that's just ridiculous. I read contracts like crazy, and I missed that line. That we had to give notice to stay at the current rate that we were at. And it was 180 days in advance. And so once that happened, it was past 180 days, because that's 6 months for those of you that don't know. You usually start thinking about this stuff 3-ish months ahead of time.
Sure,
You're like, oh crap, I got to move. But well played, landlord. Well played. But the other thing was, we moved. The previous location was around 1,300 square feet. We moved to the old HQ now, and the old HQ was almost 4,000 square feet. So it was a significantly larger space, had lots of meeting rooms. And the vision there was that we were going to have around 15 to 20 people working out of that one location in-house. And this is one of the lessons I've learned, I think, is the speed of business. Nowadays, things change quick. Markets change, economies change, business changes. And so when we were coming up for the renewal, we started, my wife works with me, obviously. Well, obviously to you and me, but maybe not
right.
to the rest of our listeners. But
She's our co-founder.
Yeah, Rachel handles the operations side of things. And so we created this pros cons list. And one of the big things is that our team is over 50% remote, i.e. Dan is not hanging out in the orange room with me. But the other part was trying to plan and understand whether that was going to change or not. And for the record, my answer is probably not. But we needed to start thinking about something that was more flexible from a cost point of view, but then also something that could pivot with us. We've become very good at pivoting and just kind of rolling with things, and remote work and partially remote workers was one of those things. And so over the past 5 years, the vision that we had when we signed the lease in the last place turned into something completely different. And that's not a bad thing. But when you start looking back as a business owner, I'm a big goals guy. I looked back and I was like, well, crap. Wait, how come we don't have 15 people in-house? Not that it's a bad thing, but it was how are we so wrong in that regard? And so as we're making our selection process, this is a really long answer to your question.
That's
but
right.
As we were making that selection process and looking into things, one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we did not do was sign another 5-year lease. And the reason being is not from a longevity point of view, but from so our business changed this much over the past 5 years. what are we going to hedge our bets against in the next 5 years? And how can we mitigate as much risk as possible? And I think that's one of the big things that a lot of times businesses don't really look at. And a really smart guy a long time ago told me, when you work on planning your business, if you want to plan your business safe, is what's the best that can happen? What's the upside? And what's the worst that can happen? What's the downside? And can you survive the worst? Right. And so that's been this thing that is just like, I hammer away at in my head whenever I make any decisions. It's in hiring, it's in firing, it's in choosing new locations. Really, any business decision is, if it's viable and the worst case scenario is survivable, let's roll. If it's not, then it's not something we can do. And so in moving to this new location, it's an adjustment, but our new office is almost 1,000 square feet with some co-working space next door. So it's a big change because it went from being 8 rooms in the old place and like a big central area for everyone to work together to, now we have a glass wall and it's now 2 rooms in this main area, where it has been 1 the past couple of weeks. So it's been a journey, but the big thing was trying to select a place that can grow with us or not. And then also, being flexible enough for us to know the ups and the downsides of everything.
It's funny because what I heard you say too is a few things, but one of them is planning your goals kind of the right way, where it used to be maybe you do like 5-year goals. Okay, 5 years from now we want to be this. And all of a sudden you get to that 5 years and you're like, wait, this looks vastly different. So now as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as an agency owner, I got to believe you're looking at goals a little bit differently, maybe a year, 2, 3, rather than 5, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you say that. So I think it was like the 3rd or 4th episode of Wayfinding Growth, we had Marissa Smith on, and it was about traction. And I mentioned how many times I've read that book, Traction by Gino Wickman.
Great book.
It is. So it's 7 times at the recording that I did in episode 4. And now I just read it another time. Right. And so one of the big things that they talk about there is like having your 1 year, 3 year and 5 year kind of goals. I think it's really important, especially, and this is something we could probably unpack in another episode, but endurance of an entrepreneur is something that can be really, really tough. And if you only have that BHOG, that big, hairy, audacious goal, or that 5-year picture of what something's going to look like, but you don't have little tiny measures along the way to know whether you made it or not, that can be pretty daunting. And I think that's personal and professional goals, to be honest. But yes, it's one of those things where we've been very much focused on our 1-year plans and our 3-year pictures, but we are even breaking that down into quarterly. Because we need to know when the agency starts getting as big as it is, 15 employees right now, like we need to start thinking about like revenue per employee and stuff like that, where it wasn't as much of an issue when we had a smaller team. So there's a lot of stuff in relating to goals that need to be manageable. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah. Well, and too, like, so I'm not an owner. So when you say revenue per employee, man, blows my mind. I mean, when Impulse Creative was small, you didn't necessarily, you worried about, I mean, you got to pay your employees, but it was less of a worry.
Right. Do we have more coming in than we have going out?
Right.
Right.
So now as you've grown, I mean, how have you navigated that idea that we have to think differently? Do you just continue to read books like Traction, or how does that work?
So it's a little bit of that. It's a lot of talking to others. I'm in a couple mastermind groups, which is quite helpful. And it's just, what I love is, so I do this podcast roulette, and it's in the business section. I literally just scroll and I choose one. And that's been really fun, actually, because parallel markets are huge opportunities. We're not really in a regulated industry per se, but like we still have ethics and things we got to follow. But as far as like a roadmap or a game plan, the marketing industry really hasn't innovated. So like if I was to talk to like a big 50-person agency, they're not going to be able to tell me how to run my agency as much as they might have really great insights into certain things, right? Like people are people, they've been people the whole time. That you got working in your agency, at least for now, until AI takes over.
Right.
I watched Terminator last night, so that's where that's
Nice.
but as all of this starts to come together, those parallel markets become really important, because you could find, like, how can you as an agency relate to manufacturing?
Yeah.
Right. Manufacturing is very much like a systemized process that creates a reliable output. But there's QA and QC and all that stuff. Well, guess what? There's QA and QC in website development too. So it's just thinking about how you can take some of the wisdoms of other industries and bring them in, I think.
And I think that's one of our big goals too with Wayfinding Growth now in season 2 here and beyond is trying to find those parallel industries for listeners.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, we're going to share our story like we're doing now. And what did Remington learn? What did, Rachel learn? What did I learn? Whatever. But to hopefully inspire other entrepreneurs, but then also talking to other people in other industries. We've got guests from SaaS companies, from coffee, coffee cafes. I mean, we've got all kinds of stuff planned. So yeah, fun. I'm excited, man. Those parallel industries are really interesting.
Yeah.
One of the things that I heard you say too is pivot a couple of times. And so my perspective, what I've seen is that as Impulse has grown from an outsider's perspective before I joined the team till now, and also talking with our growth development strategist, Jackie, Impulse went from years ago being Remington's agency that served Fort Myers to being this agency that serves the world, at least nationally anyway, the country, and having
clients in the UK now.
Okay, yeah, right on. There you go. International.
Over the pond.
I love it. So being, enterprise, I guess is what I'm looking for. Enterprise client. So how does that pivot seem too when you're making a move like this? Did you have to kind of think about that and go, okay, I can't think just locally. I have to think globally. Yeah,
so absolutely. And that's actually bringing it back to like location and space. That was a big thing. Like, we moved into another city with the new location because there was some abundant opportunity that we're going to be able to dig into in the short term, because it's a brand new development. Babcock Ranch is like a flourishing community. So there's this big opportunity there. Now, when you think of it as a business owner, you're like, oh, I can't move because then my clients aren't going to be able to find me. Well, it's not the same. Like, it used to matter what street you were on, but now with the internet, like, you've got Main Street on Google, right? Like, Main Street, literally, if you're doing things the right way, you're going to show up there. So when we looked at our customer makeup, not that there's any devalue of any of our local clients, it was a lot of them were coming on remote calls, like on video calls, rather than driving to the office and dealing with traffic. It's funny because like that's the same trend that was happening with employees. And then suddenly now, we're like, well, wait, so is a requirement that we are accessibly local to our customer base? And we're like, well, we should be. But then when we looked at the pie chart of the local clients from a revenue and even a client point of view, it was very low, the local. Like, I want to say it's like 7% of our business is now local, where 5 years ago, it was probably 97%. So there's a big shift that's happened there. And that was done intentionally.
So it's funny that in 2019 right now, when we're recording this and this is going to air, like, remote work and remote companies that you work with, definitely a thing, but there's still that desire to have, to have a company you work with have an HQ. Like, that's interesting.
Yeah. And I think it's because some of the clientele that we've got, they're older. There's an older generation, in the decision makers right now. I think that's starting to shift. So if they are remote workers, they have got a completely different view on what remote work is, and that kind of thing. But I think there's also some misconceptions, or there's more of a rooted thing. Like, we're a company that's been around since 2007. I can't do math this morning, but so since 2000, yeah, thanks. So for 12 years, right, we've been pounding the pavement, getting stuff done. and we've been here for clients, there's longevity there. And I actually don't think, now that I'm saying it, I don't think that we leverage that enough to let people know that we've been around that long, because there's a lot of technology companies that have only been out 6 months and they're asking you to commit some serious revenues. And a lot of times they're asking for contracts that are longer than they've been in business. So, so when you start thinking about that, I think a location is one of those like confidence factors that you can do without. But in a lot of cases, the longevity, it's like, oh, they have a lease. They've got to be around for, well, in this case, two years, right? Or 5 years of my old place. At least I know where I can find them.
Yeah. So speaking of lease, one of the things I heard you said earlier at the very beginning was about contracts, like, well done, landlord. I think that's kind of a lesson there too for those listeners that are business owners. Like, don't bury stuff in your contract, man. Just be honest.
Yeah, and I had an opportunity to re-sign with the same people. Maybe not for the same spot, but they will go unnamed. But I had no interest in working with them because, like, it felt dirty. You know what I mean? And I'm the kind of guy that actually reads contracts. Like, I go through and I read every line, and it freaks people out. Like when I sign my mortgage. They're like, oh, we're going to be here in about an hour. I'm like, this is like 100 pages. I'm going to need more than an hour, but I'm not going to sign anything personally or professionally that I don't know what the contents of. And well, here's a perfect example. Like, I read it and I still missed that line. Yeah. So definitely pay attention to contracts, because that's where things can get real dirty.
So Remington, when it came time to actually make the move, you've done all this research, all these thought processes and everything else. What's it like to move an office, a couple cities away or whatever? Like, you've moved,
Sure.
we moved a few times, so it's not like this is new. But for those listeners, what would you give them? What advice would you give them if they're planning a move or they're thinking about it?
Yeah. So once we finally decided on where, that was a big piece. And once we confirmed and actually got the keys, that was the other thing. Then it became, and I don't know that I necessarily succeeded in this. I tried, but I looked into the move and how do I make this the least amount of change for the team? And that's a big undertaking. Like, there's more commute in this. There's one room, don't have the meeting rooms. Like, how does the day-to-day for the team change the least amount possible? And that was like the thing that went through my head. Like, it didn't work out to where the first day at the new office, we had orange walls. It was close. I think it was a week later. But like, how do we get people into the new location and them not be shocked? Because there's going to be this like, wait, where are my pencils? Or, this desk isn't mine. And there's going to be a lot of those things that people, and it's not that people are selfish with that. It's just, as humans, we like routine. Yep. And it's funny because I always joke with the team. The only thing that's constant in Post Creative is change. Like, something's going to change. We're going to pivot to that point earlier. Like, we're going to adjust and do things a little bit differently. We moved, and that was a big one. But the big like underlying tone was, how do I make the move with the least amount of friction possible for the team? And then a whole crap ton of work. So we elected to not hire movers to move us. And that was an undertaking by itself. And the reason was because the amount of work that it would take to pack something up in a box and then pay someone else to move it, and then unpack it at the new location is almost as much work. And my wife might argue with me on this, but it's almost as much work as it would be to move things over in a more systematic way. You know what I mean? And so, luckily we were downsizing the office. So we had more desks like what are behind me, if you're on video. And so I took half the desks over to the new location so that I could get them set up. And then it was literally just moving desks. And then, Facebook Marketplace is super legit. I'm just gonna put it out there. So there's a couple strategic things, and actually just saw this unfold for one of my colleagues that work for a different company. We put out an announcement that we were moving and things were awesome. And much of that was done by you, Dan. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
And, we did this video explaining the move and talking about what everything happened, because what we wanted to make sure, if you put a "We've moved" sign in the door of the old place, the people that come there won't even see that "We've moved" sign, even though it's right in front of their face. All they'll see is the ripped down sign, right? And they'll be like, "Oh, Impulse is out of business."
Right.
That's the first thing that everyone thinks. And maybe it's because we came out of a recession and, and now people are starting to feel comfortable, but we're still kind of scared. But like, that was a big thing. And so when we said we wanted to sell a lot of the stuff at the office and we wanted to start moving, it was really important for us to make sure that the world knew that Impulse Creative was flourishing and moving. Not we're going out of business, we can't afford this big space. Mm-hmm. And I think we're one of the only companies that has really publicly said, by the way, things are awesome and we're moving to a smaller space. I haven't seen anyone actually say that out loud, but that was a big thing. Like, oh, we're moving into another spot. Oh, how big is it? Because everyone hears growth and wants to talk about like the big thing. And I have to say, I even took that like personally, like it was like an internal struggle that was really unexpected. Like, oh, this place is so much smaller. Wait a minute. It should be, this place is so much smaller. Like, I'm paying less per square foot. I'm paying less, there's less money. Like, the agency is healthier because of what we've done. But it was this mental thing is like, oh, we're not growing. Like, oh, it's not there, which is not true for the record. But the perception is the reality when it comes to your prospects and your customers. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to make sure that if we're talking about a new space or anything else, or we start fire sailing a whole bunch of furniture,
right?
Because we had 7 rooms and now we have 1.5. The big thing was we didn't want people to think we were going out of business. And I didn't have anyone say that because we were loud enough, and I'm knocking on wood right now, but we just put out a press release. We did the blog and the video. Like, we explained all of this stuff. And it was really, really well done and just kind of fell right into place when we talk about this moving strategy. I'm coming back to your actual question about what it's like to actually move. But it was one of those things that, I just didn't want people to think that there's any struggle. I wanted people to know that, like, this is a good thing. Like, we're actually excited about this move, even though it's gonna be a lot of work. And it worked out well because Rachel sold in about 3 days. I think she sold like 30 pieces of furniture. Wow. And like, if anyone wanted a deal, she was like, if you pick it up now, like that was the only way that stuff would work. And we got rid of it. I mean, we didn't have to store as much as we thought we would, which is a cost, by the way. That you have to, of course. And all the stuff we sold, we didn't have to move, I was really excited about because we were doing it ourselves. So I think it was 17 truckloads. I have a pickup truck. And then we had a huge orange table, which we'll put a picture in the show notes if we want. But a huge orange table, which we did hire movers to move because it's 10 by 5 foot and it's quartz. So I wouldn't say 700 pounds. So I was not even thinking about touching that. Yeah. So that was fun. But yeah, so all in all, less friction, making it as calculated as possible, making sure that people understand the optics and they know about it. Those were the big areas, and then doing the hard work. Yeah. That was the biggest piece.
Well, and being willing to, gosh, I'm the CEO, but also I'm the CBW, Chief Bottle Washer. But being willing, right, being willing to make it a hybrid, right? If I need to move some stuff, cool, no problem. We're small enough company, small but mighty. Be able to do this. And we'll dive into the next episode. We'll dive into that whole spin thing of like, why did we move? How do we manage the message? That kind of thing. Yeah. So, yeah, that was a great way to put it though. Cause you don't think about that. You want to sell some furniture, get rid of it, maybe make an upgrade, maybe do whatever. People go, oh, I'm going out of business.
Yeah. Like, and it just happened to a buddy of mine up north. He's moving into another location and he's got a whole bunch of crap that he doesn't want to move. And I think he put 15 or 20 things up. And then on the actual like message threads of the stuff he's selling is what's going on. Are you going out of business? Oh, what's happening? Do I have to find another t-shirt guy? And it's like, no, I'm fine. He actually put out this video. Guys, I'm fine. I've got a new location coming. We'll talk about it soon. But what happens there is now you're reactionary. you've got the wrong message up. So I can't wait to unpack that next week.
Yeah, no kidding. Good stuff, man. This has been good. I'm excited to have people listen to this and get something out of it. I think this is encouraging for people who are in that mindset of growth. And like you said, Remington, we'll unpack the idea that just because you're growing doesn't mean you have to grow in space. You can pull back a little bit, have a smaller impact on your budget and the environment.
Grow and profit.
Yeah, grow and profit. Yeah, that's good.
Profit. That'll be the title of next episode.
There you go. Awesome, man. Well, hey, any last advice for anybody moving?
Make it calculated and make sure there's the least amount of friction for your team as possible, and then worry about everybody else. If your team is happy and they're in the new location, then you've done a good job.
Excellent. Man, I look forward to each and every new episode, unpacking everything going on at Impulse Creative, kind of a serialized story here as we talk to other team members and everything else, man. For listeners and viewers, go to wayfindinggrowth.com, look in the show notes for information and connect with Wayfinding Growth with Remington and me. So there you go, man. Thanks for being here today.
And welcome to the show, Dan. Welcome to the show.
Man, I'm stoked. I'm excited. I now have, it's weird. So I now have 3 podcasts that I either host or produce or involved in some way. My personal one, a nonprofit that helps eradicate domestic and sexual abuse in the world. And then this one, it's like, oh, all right. I got 2 more to have the weekdays full of my own shows. So
hey, we can make it happen. I mean, I'm just
right.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening. If you like this episode, please share it. Post it, tweet it, gram it, email a friend. Give the gift of knowledge to someone you know that could benefit from it. And if you really loved it, please consider leaving a rating and written review on your podcast player of choice. And as always, go to wayfindinggrowth.com for resources and past episodes. Remember, we're here to help you navigate your business growth with strategic conversations and insights from experts in multiple industries. Thank you for listening to Wayfinding Growth.